News when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow.
Karen, we begin with the latest on the war with Iran. Local media reports say Iran is seeking to bar U.S. and Israeli ships from the Strait of Hormuz under a deal with Oman and to require compensation from hostile countries before they're allowed to use the waterway. That comes as the Iran-affiliated Fars news agency says the country's naval forces struck hostile targets at the entrance to the strait. President Trump says the U.S. is continuing negotiations and the strait is, in his words, sort of open right now.
We have a thing called the blockade headed up by the U.S. Navy, and we control it. And now we control it, but they can always shoot something. They always have something or drop a mine. And if you have one mine sitting out there, you sort of mess things up because people don't want to take their billion-dollar boats and accidentally get hit by a mine. But I think we're doing very well. I'm involved in the negotiation. I think we're doing fine.
Speaking to reporters in the Oval Office, President Trump said the strait could be open soon.
Meanwhile, Nathan, the U.S. is insisting on free transit through the strait and a broad return to the pre-war status quo. Richard Haass, President Emeritus of the Council on Foreign Relations, says Iran retains a strong negotiating position.
If the goal is to get the Strait of Hormuz open, which it should be, the idea that Iran would have a larger role now, I think, is inevitable. Wars have consequences. We'll have to let them sell some oil as long as most of the other sanctions stay in place. I think that's probably as good as we can expect at this point.
And Richard Haass was a guest on Bloomberg's Balance of Power. Iran says a full reopening of the strait would require the U.S. to lift its maritime blockade. The U.S. has not indicated whether it's ready to go back to the terms of the initial interim deal with Iran.
Well, Karen, oil is extending its gains on all this news. Brent crude rose above $83 a barrel after gaining almost 4% in the previous session. Right now, Brent has pulled back a bit from that level. It's at $82.87, a gain of about 0.5%. West Texas Intermediates at $77.58 a barrel. That's a gain of 0.4%. Paul Sankey with Sankey Research tells Bloomberg banning large flare-ups in the Middle East, oil should pull back.
I would say that the situation in the Strait is normalizing, and we basically have enough oil now. So I think markets are going to calm down somewhat unless there's another major conflagration. But the reality is the U.S. has run out of bombs pretty much. So I think that the actual kinetic part of the war is hopefully mostly behind us, with one major front remaining, which is the Houthis against the Saudis and the Iraqi Shias against the Saudis.
And those comments from Paul Sankey of Sankey Research come as Houthi militants launched an attack against Yemen's Saudi-backed government, claiming hundreds of deaths.
Well, here in the U.S., Nathan, sources tell Bloomberg the Trump administration is considering issuing an executive order on vaccines and autism as soon as next week. Administration officials are discussing options, including research initiatives that encompass both forward-looking studies and backward-looking analysis. President Trump has previously pushed to pare down the number of vaccines recommended for children. Scientific evidence has shown no link between autism and childhood vaccines, and decades of research has failed to identify a single cause of autism.
Well, meantime, Karen, President Trump has already signed a pair of other executive orders. These are aimed at denying citizenship to certain people born in the U.S. We get that story from Bloomberg's Amy Morris in Washington.
White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller says one order targets so-called birth tourism.
The idea that people come here pretending to be a tourist, pretending to be a visitor, but the real reason they're here is to have a child, to make that child an automatic citizen, leave our country, and then have a U.S. citizen child. It gives them access under this broken system to welfare benefits, ultimately to the voting booth.
Those born to people deemed to be alien enemies, foreign terrorists, and foreign agents would also be ineligible. The orders are almost certain to be challenged in court as a violation of the 14th Amendment. In Washington, Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Amy, thank you. Let's go to markets now. And the historic U.S. joint intervention to help prop up Japan's currency is having a limited impact, and now more action may be needed. We get an update with Bloomberg's John Tucker. John, good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Karen. The Japanese yen has now surrendered nearly half of its intervention-driven gains. Bloomberg FX rate specialist David Finnerty says they can intervene all they want. At the end of the day, it's the fundamentals that drive things.
The fact that dollar yen is back above 158, it just says a lot to the fundamentals. You can say it shouldn't be there. The market's going, but it is. And it is there because we think it should be there.
Traders now think authorities may have to intervene again. But all this may be just a Band-Aid if Japan doesn't swallow a tough pill and raise interest rates and raise them more quickly. Another wrinkle in all this is how the U.S. helped. It turns out Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent funded the intervention by selling euros. Well, that is seen as an unprecedented breach of longstanding convention with Europe. In New York, I'm John Tucker, Bloomberg Radio.
And that's news when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Karen Moscow.
I'm Nathan Hager, and this is Bloomberg.